here we go.
Welcome to the Nine Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back in to the Nine Route Fantasy Football Podcast. This is Pat and Scott in week 13. This is our start sit episode. We'd like to go back and forth each week and tell you who or who not to start, sit, whatnot, at certain positions mostly that affect your fantasy team: quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver, and we do include team defenses, as most leagues tend to. We don't talk kickers here. They're not a four-letter word, but we know some leagues have completely abolished the position, so we move off of that. We appreciate you listening to us here. This is our second season, getting it under our belt, and we do appreciate all those that like and subscribe and share, the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts. We are on Podbean, YouTube. You're able to check us out on there as well. So again, anything you can do to throw your support our way, we do appreciate it. We know you're out there listening. And again, let other people know, hey, these guys are great. They're funny. These guys are idiots. They have no clue. You should totally listen to them, crash and burn, whatever. But, get it out there. Get it out there for us, please. We do appreciate all your support on that level. Pat, you want to hit them with the socials?
Absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at the 9route1 and at Scott from Delco. We also have our website, which is www.the9routeFFB.com. Or if you wish to email the show, you can do so at the 9routeFFB@gmail.com as well. Yeah, mostly we do the start sit episode just so that, we can still compete against each other. This is pretty much, what boys do their entire lives is they make a group of friends and then they try to beat their friends at everything that they possibly can. So this is really just for us. We're glad you guys are listening, but I really just want to make sure that I just beat Scott into the ground and make sure that he knows that I know more about fantasy football than he does. That's pretty much the whole reason we do this episode.
Speaking of smelling fear, you want to hit him with the Week 12 review, Pat? Because I know I'm inching closer to you. You had a nice lead, but it's just not going to last, buddy.
Yeah, well, this week it's very strange. So same thing happened last week where
it's always strange when you lose.
No,
I don't know how he did it.
Listen, but I'm trying to soften the blow for you. Because somehow we both have one player pending still tonight. I have Matt Ryan as my start. You have Deontay Johnson as your sit. Mm-hmm. So our weekly record so far, as far as our start sits, you were 6-1-2. You had two players who were injured or didn't, left the game or didn't play because of injury. So we don't count those against you. But 6-1 on your start sits, really good. I was 6-2 with one injury on mine, with still one pending, obviously. So even though you had a slightly better record at 6-1, I somehow won the heads up 5-4. We did have another tie. Both of our starts at the defense position scored 11 points. So we got a tie on that one. But it was a weird week. It just happens to work out that the way we do the head-to-head is we literally go quarterback start for quarterback start. Whoever has the most points. You could be right. You could absolutely kill it and still lose. Now, there's a possibility if somehow Matt Ryan has more than 32.8 points tonight that I could take a bigger lead. There's also, I don't think there's a chance for you. I gave you the point for Deontay Johnson maybe it was the other way around because Darnell Mooney was injured. So in our head-to-head, it's a little bit different. We do get penalized for the injuries because we kind of have to count them in some fashion when it comes to head-to-head. It doesn't affect, like I said, our overall percentages of right and wrong, moving forward. But it does in the head-to-head. We definitely, I just basically look at dead numbers. If your guy was injured and he scored 0, then hopefully you had him in the sit column and not the start column, because if not, then you lost that matchup. But that has happened to both of us, so it's not something that is tilting the tables in any way. Our overall record heading into week 13, I am up 62-55, and we now have 3 ties on the season. So got you by 7, which again isn't a ton, but it's tough to make up unless you really kill a week. Like even if you beat me 8-2, you only make up 6. It's difficult because you really have to nail your starts and your sits, which are pretty difficult to do, honestly. I mean, we do our best here to give you some good start sit advice, but I mean, you never you had who'd you have? You had Kenneth Walker as your start for the week, which, hey, you won that one. Good job. He finished the day with 16.9 points, but he fell into the end zone twice. Didn't really do a whole lot running the ball, which, hey, all we care about is the fantasy points.
I don't care.
So you ended up winning that matchup, but it's, like I said, you can't, if Kenneth Walker doesn't score a touchdown, he ends the day with like 4 fantasy points. And I'm not saying that to, specifically dog you out. That just happened to be the guy off of the top of my head who, had.
Did I get credit for my quarterback switch?
Oh yeah, I gave you
okay,
that. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah,
you
did have Davis Mills, and then when I actually text you, I remember I texted you earlier in the week and said, "Hey, you switching to Kyle Allen now that Mills is out?" And your answer was Mike White, and so that's who you got credit for. Good job. You definitely called that one there.
Yeah.
But Matt Ryan still has to play, so you never know. He could absolutely light up the Steelers tonight and make that gap a little bit bigger.
I really need him to just to have. It's weird. Like my one league where I have defense, the big crazy league. It's like I have I have Miles Jack left to play, and I have Michael Pittman. I'm down 20, and he's got Matt Ryan. So I need the offense to just completely fall apart. Pittman to somehow get like a jet sweep touchdown, and Miles Jack just go insane and have like 25 tackles on Jonathan Taylor and the rest of the offense. A couple sacks wouldn't hurt. I mean, there's potential for me to have a shot, but I don't know if we'll be able to do it. But and on top of that, I need Matt Ryan to stink it up for this as well.
He doesn't even have to stink it up for me to lose this one. He just has to not absolutely destroy the Steelers, because I think Mike White finished as the quarterback 3 or 4 so far on the week. So going to be tough for Matt Ryan to eclipse that. But
he's tight end 5 in our league. Yeah, as of right now.
Yeah, so he's tight end 5. If he played tight end, he'd be tight end 1. Trust
QB.
me.
Sorry, I get those letters all mixed. It's 2 letters are side by side. Yeah, QB 5. Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Josh Allen, and Mike White is 5th.
Wow. Well, good call.
Hey.
We still only get one.
That's what we do here at the 9 round.
We go deep.
We go deep. We are not afraid. You'll notice that with one of my start sit picks this week. So,
all right. Well, let's get into them. We've done the review, so let's do the start sits. I had the advantage this week, 5-4. Mm-hmm. So I'll start this week. Start sits. My start this week at the quarterback position is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo versus the Miami Dolphins. We talked about Jimmy G a few weeks ago and how he had by far the best remaining schedule of all of the streaming options at quarterback. This week is another one of those good matchups, but this one comes attached to an offense that has scored the 7th most points per game so far in the season. And as good as the 49ers defense has been this year, the Dolphins have been incredibly hard to stop. This should mean a fairly high-scoring game, and that should force the 49ers offense to be a little bit more aggressive throwing the ball. And like we said before, Jimmy G doesn't have to beat you with his arm like Joe Montana or with his legs like Steve Young. He just needs to get the ball into the hands of his playmakers and let them rack up the points for him. 2 weeks ago versus Arizona, he threw 4 touchdown passes. 2 of those TD passes were George Kittle making things happen after the catch. So as long as Jimmy G can keep getting the ball to his playmakers, which San Francisco has 3 of the best in the league as far as yards after the catch, talking about McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle, I think Jimmy G can put up respectable touchdown numbers pretty much any week, as long as those touchdowns come on passes and not rushes, which, again, San Francisco is up there, one of the top teams in the league as far as rushing touchdowns. But I think with the Dolphins matchup, going to be some scoring going on the other side of the football. So the 49ers are going to have to keep up, and I think that is going to lead to a pretty big day for Jimmy G.
Hopefully not. My start of the week, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. I'm going to roll again. I am going to take Mike White against those Minnesota Vikings. In his first start of the season for a benched Zach Wilson, with a lot more weapons than he even had last year in a couple spot starts where he included a monster game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Mike White kind of went off. Again, we just said about him he was tight end. I want to say it again. He was quarterback 5 in our league of record this week and not really expecting anything to change there. 22 of 28 for 315, 3 touchdowns, was only sacked once, got multiple people involved in the game. Elijah Moore, people that thought he was no longer on the roster. Guess what? You're involved. I just looking, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different receivers. Zach Wilson ain't doing that, folks. Sorry, not happening. Garrett Wilson, him and the rookie had a nice connection. 5 catches, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns. Going up against the Minnesota Vikings, who really stink defensively this season. They're really bad. They give up a lot of points to the position, about 20 points a game alone to the quarterback position. Wide receivers tend to feast on them a little bit too. If you look at them overall in the league, passing yards, they are giving up, third most in the league, almost close to 400 yards total a game in total yards. They're giving up about 276 yards passing a game. So that's one of your leakier passing defenses for a quarterback. It's actually the worst. Steelers still have to go tonight. So unless they get lit up, Minnesota gives up the most yards in passing a game, about 23 points a game. They've been living off of outscoring other teams. Mike White, start him this week with confidence, has another potential, I think, again, to be a top 5 quarterback in fantasy football.
Yeah, it definitely has a potential to be a top 5 tight end for sure.
Yeah, shush.
So at running back this week, I'm still picking on the Texans. This time, though, it's with the backup running back. Nobody's going to sit Nick Chubb. So I'm just, that's obviously, I'm not going to use him as my start for the week. But Kareem Hunt has actually been pretty disappointing this year. He's only been playing 46% of the snaps and has only taken 33% of the team's rushing attempts. The Browns have definitely moved away from what was a close to 50-50 committee approach that they used the last 2 years. And Hunt's production has suffered pretty badly because of it. In this game, however, I think the Browns could pass a little bit more than they usually do just to kind of keep Deshaun Watson, kind of get him involved, making sure that he understands the offense, making the right reads, things like that. And this is where Kareem Hunt tends to shine. He is their pass-catching running back. Now, again, Nick Chubb has had more targets, is on pace for more targets and receptions this year than he has any other year of his career. But Kareem Hunt is the guy who is the real pass-catching specialist out of the backfield. They could also have a really big lead, and I expect them to have a pretty big lead in this game. And there's just no point in having Chubb run the ball when you're up. If it gets to be to the point where this past week against the Dolphins, I think they were down 30-0, almost by halftime. There's no point in having your star running back out there, pounding the rock just to, potentially get injured. So I do think that Hunt could see a lot more carries in this game than he has in any other game this season. And the Texans are giving up 31 PPR points per game to the running back position. So even if Chubb does have a good week, which I completely expect him to, there's room for 2 good running backs against this defense. And this wouldn't be the first week that they've given up, top 15 production to 2 running backs on the same team.
Yeah, possibly, Pat. Possibly. We shall see. Guy I kind of like. It had a nice game yesterday. He's not a non-household name by any stretch. Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Chicago Bears this week, who, again, we just kind of talked about them briefly, talking about Mike White at the quarterback position. But Aaron Jones had a nice little game last night and has been pretty consistent throughout the season, starting to really come around. And now if you're going to be dealing with potential injury to Aaron Rodgers, where you are going to move on to Jordan Love, this to me is all about the opportunities being more and more in his favor. Currently, the Bears are the second worst defense in the league at stopping the run, and the running back in fantasy football. They're giving up about 22 points a game to the position, 13 touchdowns. They give up the passing game as well. At the end of the day, seeing if that's the case, and again, if Rodgers is not the guy and it's Jordan Love, to say that they're going to lean on, but definitely favor the ground game. And, A.J. Dillon is there as well. He could vulture a little bit of this production. Sometimes I've paired them up in the past for a start and sit. You kind of saw him get a little involved yesterday against the Philadelphia Eagles. But Aaron Jones, to me, has the potential to be, again, he's another guy. I think he's got top 5 potential against the Bears this week, which obviously is huge in fantasy football. I mean, again, he's definitely started to pick up the pace last 4 weeks. You're looking at the game against Dallas, close to 26 points in our league of record with over 100 yards rushing and a touchdown, 14 points against Tennessee. And again, dropping close to 20 points, about 19 points last night with a little bit of a do-it-all factor and a receiving touchdown. Speaking of which, Pat, I know you kind of had and I didn't follow the final. Were you able to cash in on that Aaron Jones rushing yards, or did it not?
No, I missed it by 5 yards.
I saw him going, and then it's like, yeah, but it was a catch. I figured it was just flat rushing, not combined yardage.
Yeah, if I had to go on total yards, I think I would have got there. I think it was 89, but he only had 43 rushing yards, and I think I had it at 47.5. So I needed 5 more. Yeah.
He was 99 total yards.
yeah, I think it was like 80, 89 or something, like 89.5.
Man.
Oh well, this is what it is. Win some, you lose some. For my wide receiver start this week, I am going to, now I had my picks in before you. So I say I'm going to piggyback off of you only because you spoke his name already, but I had him in the doc. Really like him a lot this week. That man, Garrett Wilson versus those Minnesota Vikings.
Good call.
The Jets start a stretch this week that basically will determine whether or not they make the playoffs. They play 3 teams that are leading their division and the Dolphins in their last 6 games. So 4 of the last 6 are against division leaders and the Miami Dolphins, who actually I think the Dolphins are the division leaders now in that AFC East, if I'm not mistaken, because they beat the Bills head-to-head. Have the same record now. So 4 division leading teams in their last 6 games. Their defense should be able to at least keep them in all of those games. The big question so far this year has been the offense. And Mike White looked like the answer to the Jets' quarterback problems last week versus Chicago. And now he gets one of the worst defenses in the league in the Minnesota Vikings. Like you just said, the Vikings are the 6th worst versus the wide receiver position. They give up almost 40 PPR points per game to the wide receivers. And Garrett Wilson has become the alpha wide receiver on this team. Coming into the year, didn't know, was Corey Davis going to be, the established veteran? Elijah Moore showed a lot of promise at the end of last year. Garrett Wilson obviously coming in as a rookie. Like, how was this sort of going to shake out? But Wilson has been the man, and he has shown that he is the man. And I think if the Jets want to have any chance of winning enough of these next few games to make the playoffs, they're going to need to do it on offense. And I think this Minnesota Vikings team is just the team to do it against, especially with as bad as their defense has been this year.
Yeah, I definitely see. You're going to try to steal some of my points right there, buddy. I don't like you no more. Moving on to my wide receiver start of the week. I'm looking at you, one Tyler Lockett. He's had a pretty solid season overall. Last 4 weeks, he's wide receiver 21. DK Metcalf starting to get a little more involved too with that offense. Where he was a little lost at the beginning of the year. Tyler Lockett's 14th in our league of record for the season, tied for 4th in the league with 6 receiving touchdowns. So, not to say dependency, but it's good to see overall that he does get involved. He's got a good matchup this week against those Los Angeles Rams, who we talked about are starting to leak a little too much oil based on injuries. If there is truth to Aaron Donald not being healthy, possibly being injured, I know that this week it's supposed to shake out. Definitely going to help keep Geno Smith safe when it comes to pass rush and things of that nature. The Rams overall defensively, they're not last year's team, so they definitely leak a lot of times the way teams do after that. They get into a funk, but the injuries are definitely factoring in. The Rams, they do give up points to the quarterback position as well. Geno Smith has had a very, very comeback player of the year. I got to think, or some potential there. based on resurrecting his career, at least in theory. But I like Tyler Lockett a lot this week against the Rams. I think he's going to do very well. I think he's got top 10, possibly top 5 potential. In a game now for Seattle, they are in virtually must-win mode at this point. They really can't afford to lose any more games. Yesterday was tough against the Raiders. It wasn't conference, but from here on out, and this being a division game, I like Tyler Lockett to do pretty well against those Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, Lockett's been, I don't want to say surprisingly good, but I think the loss of Russell Wilson had everybody pushing him and Metcalf down in the beginning of the season, and they've shown that, well, first of all, Geno Smith has shown that he can still play quarterback and has been astonishingly good this year. And Lockett and Metcalf have not fallen nearly as far as I thought. I want to say Lockett's actually ahead of where he finished last year as far as wide receivers. I want to say he's like somewhere around wide receiver 13 or 14 on the season. And I think last year he finished around 16. So, still having a Tyler Lockett season, that's definitely a good call there.
Yeah, because he was and bringing up Russell Wilson, like he was boom or bust with him. He'd have those games where he'd put up 50 points.
Mm-hmm.
And then you didn't hear from him for the rest of the season. And there's no way somebody has that ability. But to see, last year with injured Russell Wilson, and he kind of took to the forefront, and Metcalf, that was kind of a lost season. And this year to see what's been going on with, like you say, maybe a more competent quarterback. At least it looks that way on paper when you look at both teams. And Metcalf kind of quietly sneaking back into relevance over the last few weeks, getting healthy and stuff like that. Yeah, Seattle's got playoff potential, and again, I feel like this week, let alone for the rest of the year, he's a guy that can help you out to win your league.
Absolutely. All right, so my start of the week at tight end, I am going to go with Gerald Everett from the Los Angeles Chargers. Everett's he's a weird guy every week to rank because he's got some games where he does really well, and then some games he sort of disappears, but he's still top 10 in targets, tied for 11th in receptions. It just seems like he gets enough action to be fantasy relevant, but not enough to like actually win you your week. So there's not many tight ends that are going to consistently win you a week. It's basically Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, and I mean that's really probably it. I mean, I guess Dalton Schultz is a guy who's turned in a couple of good games, finished as the tight end 1 this past week. Obviously, barring the Monday night situation and what happens there. But Everett's one of those guys who, like I said, is consistent. He's solid. If he scores a touchdown, he'll finish inside the top 10. If he doesn't, maybe he doesn't score inside the top 10, but, still get you a respectable, 7 to 8 fantasy points. This week, though, they get to go up against the Raiders, who are the 26th team, the 6th worst against the tight end position, giving up about 14 PPR points per game to the position. I think this is a week, especially if Mike Williams isn't able to come back from that ankle injury yet. I think this is a week where, again, the Raiders showed that they can score, and we know the Chargers can score, and I think it's going to be another high-scoring game. I believe this is the second highest over-under on the week. This actually might be the highest over-under on the week if I'm remembering correctly. I don't have it in front of me, but it's going to be a game where there's a ton of points and definitely an opportunity for Gerald Everett to shine and get in the end zone at least once. So I like Everett this week against the Raiders.
And I will continue on my, on my island. I'm going to go with this guy, Joe, for the rest of the season. And why not? I took him in a tough matchup, and it was tough. It was an abomination of a matchup, no points scored. But Juwan Johnson, this week, better matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, again, they have a tough defense, yes, but even last year they were a little suspect against covering the tight end, keeping them out of action. They've improved slightly this season, but not by much. They still give up almost 9 points a game to the position as a whole, which, that's pretty much where you want to get to, let alone double digits. And this guy, up until the past game against San Fran, tough defense against the tight end, tough defense overall. New Orleans got shut out. And I know he had one potential target that he wasn't able to hold on to that would have possibly been a touchdown. And then when Alvin Kamara actually had a big fumble near the goal line, I was watching the highlight and saw him dive towards the ball, try to get there. So he almost had a chance to sneak one in, but wasn't able to do so. Prior to that, though, you're looking at the previous 3 games. He had 10 receptions on 13 targets, 3 touchdowns, double-digit points in each game. I think he gets back on track. It's a Monday night matchup against Tampa Bay in Tampa with a little bit better opportunity compared to that ferocious San Fran defense. I love Juwan Johnson this week. And again, I will probably roll with him for the remainder of the season because he is my guy when it comes to fantasy football tight ends.
You know I'm going to beat you to the show sheet next week and put him in as my start.
Shotgun.
Just so you know.
Shotgun. I literally just said he's going to be my guy.
I'm going to do it on purpose now.
Even
if he's got a terrible matchup.
From here on out, Juwan Johnson is my tight end start of the week.
Can't call dibs every week.
Shotgun.
That's not the way this works. It's not how any of this works. All right. Let's move on to defenses. This week, I'm going to start the Ravens defense against the Denver Broncos. Ravens put up a little bit of a dud last week versus the Jags, but the Broncos are not the Jags. I honestly didn't think I'd say that out loud this season, but here we are. Denver's offense still hasn't found itself, and at this point, I just don't think it's going to happen. I held out hope for a little while that they would get it together. Russ would figure out this offense a little bit, but at this point, I've lost all that hope. The Broncos are the 7th worst team versus the opposing fantasy defense, giving up just under 8 fantasy points per game, which strangely enough is our mark for picking our starts and sits. And the Ravens have actually been better on defense. Again, not including this past week's game versus the Jaguars. But after starting the season looking a lot like last year's Ravens, who couldn't stop any opposing passing attack, they've played better over the last few weeks. They're in a tie for the lead in their division, so this is a really big game for them. They want to make sure that they stay on top of Cincinnati, and I think that the defense is going to show up in a big way this week. Since getting their secondary a little bit more healthy, the Ravens have actually given up less passing yards per game over the last 5 games than they did over the first 6. So I think that's good news for their defense. And I think that against Denver, I think that's even better news for their defense.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Defense for me, this one should be kind of a no-brainer. I almost feel like I'm cheating right now, but I'm not. I'm just that smart. We're looking at the Cleveland Browns going up against the Houston Texans, the worst offense in the league, the Houston Texans. 279 yards a game, or average of under 16 points a game. They stink. I mean, they're just a bad team. We see that, and they're going to probably be, that bad for the rest of the season, going up against the defense that, aren't killers, but they're going to have a nice matchup against Houston. This is that game too, by the way. This is the Deshaun Watson coming back to football against his former team. I think there's going to be a lot on the table for the Cleveland Browns to really step up and show that, this is our guy and so on and so forth. I just see him kind of dominating this whole thing, when it comes down to it. The Houston Texans, they're a -5 in the turnover battle. Cleveland's actually worse. They're a -7. They fell on some hard times. At the same time, this to me is a no-brainer of a matchup. But Cleveland Browns are going to feast on the Houston Texans this week. And I think just based off of that matchup alone, Kyle Allen, Dameon Pierce, love you, but it's going to be tough for you, buddy. We'll see. I like that a lot. The Browns over the Texans this week.
I agree. And that's why I'm going to start my sits at quarterback with Deshaun Watson. I know that sounds a little counterintuitive. And I know that, like you just said, there's that whole revenge game narrative with him coming back to Houston, playing against his former team and all that stuff. Not like the NFL didn't, plan that or anything when they decided how many weeks he was going to sit for. But I am going to hold off on starting him for this week for a couple different reasons. The obvious one is he hasn't played a game in the NFL in almost 2 years, and more than likely he's going to be rusty. The second is Kevin Stefanski is not your run up the score kind of coach. Don't get me wrong. He's going to want to win this game and he's going to want to win comfortably, but I can't see him calling a ton of pass plays if the Browns are up big, which I expect them to be. I mean, I think somehow if the Texans can keep this game close, Watson may be forced to throw and could end up having a good game. But again, even if they do have to throw a bunch, then you still have to revert back to the first thing I brought up, which was he hasn't played a game in, like I said, almost 2 years. The last game he played was in 2020 when there was no fans in the stands. You remember that was the COVID year, so they were playing in empty stadiums. And again, it's been a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half since he's played football. So as much as I love Deshaun Watson, I have him on a lot of my playoff teams ready to rock and roll for, the end of the season. I definitely want to take a wait and see approach this first week. And I think Cleveland is going to be up big, and I think they're going to be running the ball a ton. So I don't really suspect a big week from Watson. Houston just played Miami this past week, and, they had Tua pulled midway through the third quarter. They were up that big. So I don't think that Cleveland's offense is anywhere near as potent as Miami's offense, but I do think that they could get a big lead and, sort of just have Watson in there handing the ball off a bunch for the last quarter and a half of this game or so.
Yeah, I know we talked about stuff previous episodes and things like, I agree. I think it's going to be a tricky first game. If you have the cojones to put him out there as your starting quarterback, coming out totally, in the gray, you have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah. Could he go off? Maybe. Yeah. Like you said, but is it going to be more of like weaning him back into pro football and kind of making sure that, they don't do much, and they're a ground-based team, so they can lean on that running game pretty hard. So yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think you probably got this one pegged pretty good. My tight end, I keep doing this. Jesus. My quarterback sit of the week is going to be that Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans. Again, hasn't had great numbers. Not that you maybe always look to start him. He might be, a super flex option, maybe more for some people and things like that. But this week, his matchup couldn't be worse. He's going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, the best defense against the quarterback in fantasy football. 15 interceptions. They just smoked Aaron Rodgers out last night, knocked him out of the game. It is not good. Again, you're a team that's based on Derrick Henry running the football. You don't live off of that quarterback play. And again, also for those that stream and look for any type of advantage, he's not startable this week in any format. If you do, you're crazy. It's just not going to happen. I'm not even going to go any further. Ryan Tannehill, sit of the week at quarterback. Enough said. Yeah,
Aaron Rodgers doesn't turn the ball over a ton, and Eagles picked him off twice in basically less than 3/4 of a game. So I agree. Not a great matchup for Tannehill. I also don't believe in that game that Miles Sanders has a great matchup. He's going to be my running back sit of the week versus Tennessee. Sanders exploded last week versus the Packers for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. And the Eagles' offense has been better this year than most people expected, and Sanders has been more involved in that offense. He's played over 61% of the snaps at running back for Philadelphia and has over 72% of the running back carries. He also has 8 rushing touchdowns this year. That's 8 more than he had all of last year. So he's obviously turned what was a pretty dismal 2021 into a pretty good campaign here in 2022. This week, though, I don't think Sanders finds much room to run the ball. The Titans are the 4th best team versus the running back in fantasy football, giving up only 18.4 PPR points per game to the position. They rank 2nd in the league in rushing yards allowed at just over 82 per game, and have amazingly only given up 2 rushing touchdowns on the entire season. They've been very susceptible through the air, though, and I think that's where the Eagles can exploit them. I couldn't make A.J. Brown my start of the week because he's pretty much an auto start every week, but I think he has a monster game against his former team this week. Miles Sanders, unfortunately, not so much.
Yeah, I hear that. It's the matchups, and that's why I am looking to sit. I really feel the whole offense, which hasn't been good, is going to definitely take a beating. But Latavius Murray, who has been basically turned into the running back 1 of the Denver Broncos, going up against the Baltimore Ravens this week. And the Ravens, they didn't start out hot, maybe so much on defense as a team aspect, but they've come around. But in fantasy football purposes, they're about fifth best against the running back position. And in our league of record coming into this week, they were ninth, but they've definitely improved. They haven't given up 1,000 yards yet. They're actually one of the lowest in total yardage when it comes to that. Again, they always have strong defense, strong linebacker play. The dumpster fire that is the Denver Broncos and their offense this week, going against a tough matchup like that against the Baltimore Ravens, I just don't see any potential for anybody coming out of that game. I think Baltimore's pretty ticked off. They lost a tough one yesterday against Jacksonville. They kind of have a stranglehold on their division, yes, but they really need to kind of take the reins if they want to move up in the conference and host a playoff matchup instead of being on the road. There's still, I think, some potential for, a number one overall seed, stuff like that. Latavius Murray, for me, is going to be a sit this week. I don't see anything good happening to that offense as far as double-digit players and whatnot. Can't imagine anybody. Russ can't cook. We know that. But I think the running game gets shut down to exploit him more. And again, they just overall, that Baltimore defense is going to feast on Denver. So sit Latavius Murray.
Yeah, Latavius Murray's become the Javonte Williams somehow in this offense.
Yeah. Crazy.
All right, so moving on to wide receiver. My sit of the week is going to be Curtis Samuel versus the New York Giants. Samuel came out of the gate on fire this season and was actually a top 20 wide receiver through the first 4 weeks. But that was with Carson Wentz at quarterback. And since week 8, he hasn't had more than 4 targets in a game. And he actually had none this past week versus Atlanta. Sometimes certain quarterbacks have connections with certain wide receivers. It just doesn't seem like Heineke and Samuel have that connection. Heineke just tends to target Terry McLaurin a ton and not really a lot of, other options on the team, which I don't blame him. Terry McLaurin's a great wide receiver, but I think that's part of the reason why he struggles is because of the fact that he hyper targets one guy and it's a little bit easier to defend. And oh, by the way, they have to face a Giants defense this week that's the 4th best versus the wide receiver position in fantasy, giving up just 28.5 PPR points per game total to the wide receiver position. And this game has one of the lowest over-unders on the slate in week 13 at just 40.5 points. I don't expect much scoring in this one, and I definitely don't expect it from Curtis Samuel. You can sit him this week versus the New York Giants.
All right. Here we go. I know nobody's going to take this the right way and whatever. I know occasionally we go out on a limb for a start or more for a sit. Where normally I'd say this was even more of a fade. I really think that this is probably going to be a thing. I am sitting Justin Jefferson against the New York Jets. I know he's, the best wide receiver in football and number 2 in fantasy in our league of record. And I get all that. He's had some monster games this season and has really shown his ability to make tough catches and really is that guy that, again, anything you're talking about in, dynasty keeper leagues, it's not even an afterthought. Most receiving yards through the first 3 seasons. He set a record. Well, I went back and looked a little bit, and obviously no points were scored during a bye week. I do remember him having a little trouble here and there in certain games. He had a little bit of a clunker against the Eagles. Darius Slay kind of had him shut down pretty well, and that was a tough loss. They won against Detroit the next week, but he was really a non-factor and only ended up with 14 receiving yards and 4 points. And then recently against the Dallas Cowboys just 2 weeks ago, or 2 games ago anyway, he only amassed 6.3 points a game, 33 yards. I feel like when he's getting that heavy shadow coverage of a solid cornerback, a top 5, so to speak, that's what happens. Obviously, this will be a big test for the Jets. Chances are one Sauce Gardner, who has been ranked as the top rookie out of the first round, just out of all players, like on PFF, and everybody's saying how he looks like he is legit. He's got that shutdown ability and really doesn't get beat up a lot in pass coverage, a tiny bit leaky against run, with contain and stuff like that. But overall, I think he's going to be the guy that looks at this matchup. They both will. And I think the Jets defense overall is really going to take it to, again, the wide receiver position where they are a top 4 team against wide receivers. You go and take a look at the Jets against the quarterback position. They're a solid top 10. I think those things factor in. And I think this is a game that Minnesota, if it gets away, they're not worried about losing as much because, again, they're in the driver's seat in their division. It's a non-conference game, so the tiebreakers wouldn't matter as much. But at the end of the day, I think Justin Jefferson is going to have one of the worst games of his season. It's going to be this week against Sauce Gardner. I could be dead wrong, and he has his best game just to show off. But my gut is telling me nope, and I think Minnesota as a whole is going to struggle. Kirk Cousins, the rest of the gang is going to be tough. Dalvin Cook will probably be maybe your most affable player when it comes down to it. But Justin Jefferson, you're not going to do it. I get it. You're not going to do it. But when it comes back at the end of the week, you look at the points, he'll be worthy of a sit this week.
All right. That's I think that's you've made some ballsy calls in the past. That's the ballsiest one I've seen so far. So we'll see how that one turns out. At the tight end position, I'm going to sit Mike Gesicki versus the San Francisco 49ers. Now, Gesicki is one of those guys who can pop any week just because of how explosive the Dolphins' offense is. Unfortunately for him, he hasn't been a major piece of that offense so far this season. He's only got 24 receptions on 35 targets. And to make things worse, the 49ers are really tough versus the tight end position. They're the 5th best team versus tight ends in fantasy, giving up just about 9 points per game to the position, and that's in PPR scoring. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle just account for too much of this team's passing targets. They account for a little over 55% of the team targets. And now you're mixing in, Mostert if he's healthy, Jeff Wilson, who's a good pass catching back. All those guys are also soaking up some of the targets that are available for Gesicki. And to me, it's just as good as the Dolphins offense is and as many points as they could potentially score this week. It's just, I don't know. I just don't see Gesicki being any more involved than he has been, and especially against a team who does a really good job at taking the tight end away. I'm looking to find another option if I have Gesicki as my starting tight end this week for sure.
Yeah, that was one I had circled actually, but I saw you had him, and yeah, I don't disagree. I think he's got a shot to just be staying in, blocking, doing stuff like that. Not a factor on anybody's roster for this week. Another guy I think who is going to start to hurt a little bit. He had a couple big breakout games, and we were like, it's finally Cole Kmet season. Obviously, Justin Fields being banged up with the shoulder. He didn't have a great game with Trevor Siemian. At the end of the day, you can't start him this week. I don't think against Green Bay. You could probably find a better option if he's your guy. He might get you 4 or 5 points. But I think until Justin Fields is back and healthy and that offense is clicking the way it was for a few weeks, this is not going to be a good matchup. Again, it's not like Green Bay is lights out against the tight end position per se or anything like that. They kind of give up around like 6 points a game. That might help you a little bit, but that's probably not going to help get you over the top. But I feel like, again, that team is, just in a bad spot, the Bears, with whoever is quarterbacking, unless it's a healthy Justin Fields, and that has an effect on Cole Kmet. For those of you out there, I think you can find a better option, both streaming and possibly just for the concept of a waiver wire pickup.
And finally, moving on to the defense, I am actually a little, I don't know, I guess I'm in the opposite camp as you with this whole Jets-Minnesota thing. The Jets are a top 5 actual defense, not fantasy-wise, but actual defense in the league, in my opinion. They're designed to shut down the passing attack, which is basically what this league is right now. I think, unfortunately for them, the Vikings can run the ball if they have to. They haven't done it for as many yards as I'd like to see, but they're tied for 7th in the NFL with 12 rushing touchdowns. And as good as Sauce Gardner has been this year, I don't know how he's going to handle Justin Jefferson. I know that Jefferson has been shut down a couple times this season, but in both of those games, the pass rush had really gotten to Kirk Cousins, and that had been why he, hasn't been able to find Jefferson in those games. Both of those games were against the top 2 pass rush teams in the league. Now, the Jets are good. They're a good pass rushing team, but they're not what the Cowboys defensive line is. And I'm not saying that the Jets defense won't play well. It's just that the Vikings are really good at scoring points in multiple ways, and they really don't turn the ball over that much. They're tied for 8th with only 12 turnovers on the season. And while I do love the Jets defense in real life, like I said, they have a really tough road ahead in the upcoming weeks. And I think it starts this week in Minnesota, where they're going to be playing on the road. And where the over-under for this game is actually the 5th highest on the week. And I think that, especially with Mike White at quarterback now, I think both teams could put some points on the board, and that could spell a pretty tough day for both of these defenses. I think this is going to be a higher scoring game than most people believe.
I know you and I disagree, so that is where we shall.
This is going to
leave it.
That game's going to make or break this week.
Yeah. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. I'll enjoy that very much so. Finally, last but not least, defensive sit of the week. Kind of picked on it for a smidge, talking of one angle, but the Denver Broncos, who have had a pretty solid fantasy defense per se, for a lot of parts of this season. Not going to happen this week for a few reasons. First of all, going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens don't really turn the football over a lot, so you're not going to get a lot of that. They're actually +8 in the turnover battle. A few more picks than fumbles lost, so you're not looking at that. That quarterback that plays for the Ravens is a guy who's pretty good. We know Lamar Jackson can single-handedly take over some football games. The Ravens really kind of control the football, with all the banged up running backs that they have. It's kind of like the moxie, that division where they do ground and pound to the tune of about 163 yards a game on the ground. So you're not going to give the football up. You're going to just sit there and kind of bleed the defense out. And last but not least, we've always talked about it. We've mentioned it a few times that watching, some of the highlights and seeing that member of the defense kind of laying into Russell Wilson a little bit. I feel like this squad, and Pat, you and I talked about it before the show, that this defensive squad for Denver has really done everything they could to keep this team afloat throughout the season. And I think they're tired. I think they see, an inept coach and a cooked quarterback that's costing them games and wins, and that are, they're leaving it out there for them. So at the end of the day, I think that some of that is not so much a mutiny, not guys quitting and so much, but yeah, I don't see themselves laying down and dying to win football games from here on out, not for a coach and a quarterback that they don't believe in. And I think Baltimore is just a team to run them off the field, probably going to win by double digits easily. It strikes me as going to be one of those like 38-3 or 38-10 finals that just really kind of blows a team's doors off. And that would pretty much do it for the Broncos. Possible negative points when it's all said and done, because even Baltimore can beat you in special teams too.
Yeah, Baltimore is they've struggled a little bit on offense recently, but they definitely have the potential to blow up at any point in time. I think they struggle, with their wide receiver position, really. I mean, they traded Hollywood Brown, and then they lost Rashad Bateman to injury earlier this season. And they just, if it's not Mark Andrews, they just haven't really seemed to have been able to find it on offense. Hopefully, Lamar Jackson will run the ball a little bit more, as I think that's something that even good defenses can't really defend against unless you have a player who is just super athletic, the safety position or something that can spy. It's really difficult to stop a guy like Lamar Jackson from moving the football if he really wants to just drop back to pass and then pull it down and run whenever he sees a lane. It's almost impossible to stop. So I do think that could get really bad for the Broncos in this one. I do agree. All right, well, that's going to do it for our starts and sits this week. Hopefully, we'll have a good week like we did last week. 2 weeks ago, we absolutely sucked. Last week, we did really well, actually. I said both of us more than 50% correct, so that's a good sign. Hopefully, we're moving in the right direction. We can keep that going. You want to hit them with our socials again before we head out for the night?
Absolutely. Again, we appreciate everyone out there who is listening, or, hey, if you want to help grow the brand here at the 9 Route, we are at the 9routeFFB@gmail.com if you want to shoot us an email. On Twitter, we are at the 9 Route 1, also at Scott from Delco, and our website is www.the9routeFFB.com. We are available on Apple Podcast, Podbean, YouTube. You can listen, like, subscribe. We do really appreciate for everyone out there to be a part of the show and subscribe. You may not listen to every episode, but hey, the ones you do, hopefully we help get you a little further into your fantasy league, closer to taking that deep dive all the way to a fantasy football championship.
Before we head out, we just want to thank Mickey's Pub in Tuckerton, New Jersey for partnering with the show. If you're looking for a great place to watch the NFL on Sunday, Mickey's is it. Great food, drink specials, and all the football you can handle. Mickey's Pub, 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton, New Jersey, where friends and family meet. And that is going to do it for us for this week. I think you could make up a little bit of ground here. I'm looking at these starts and sits, and I'm actually this is probably the first week I'm a little bit nervous, to be honest with you. So we'll see how it turns out. But I think you made some good picks this week, some really tough. You're going to be tough to beat. I will say that.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, and technically if I do get the Justin Jefferson one right, I just like to hope that maybe I get some bonus points. So, tactically, taking a number Y, not big guy, but hey, take some risks. That's what you do. No risk it, no biscuit. Speaking of that, folks, thanks again for week 13 starts and sits. That is Pat. I am Scott, and we will talk to you next week, week 14. Peace.